Maggie Baron-Keitze was a witness to an unimaginable event that forever changed her life. In 1993, she was working in the bishop's residence in Burundi, Africa. There she was hiding with her husband and children and 72 other people whose lives were in danger simply because of their ethnicity. The Tutsis stormed the bishop's residence with machetes. They stripped her of all of her clothes and burned them, including her underwear. And they forced her to watch as they slaughtered her husband and her children in front of her. And all 72 of those people she was hiding, along with all the priests and all the nuns. She stayed with the bodies and risked her life to bury the victims. 15 years later, she still wonders, why? Why? The world is a violent place. 48 years ago today, Martin Luther King was assassinated. Holy Thursday, just 2 days ago, there was another campus massacre. This time Kenya, 148 university students just like ours, were divided off from the Muslim students, and 148 of them were murdered. A few weeks earlier, and we are accosted again and again with more and more updates on this tragedy. A pilot decides to commit suicide, itself a violent act. Only this time, he chooses to murder 149 other people with him. Drive-by shootings happen just down the street almost every week, it seems like right now, somewhere in our city. One of them, January a year ago, was one of our students who was sitting on the porch with his friends, and somebody drove by and shot. We did his funeral. Beheadings are international television. Bombings of churches and synagogues and mosques while people are just trying to pray. War, relentless war. Last month and again next week, prisoners will be executed by the state of Missouri as once again we try to stop killing by killing. Sexual assault, even on our campus, is gut-wrenching. A priest, his name is Father Greg Boyle, just a couple of weeks ago did a funeral for a young person killed by gang violence. It was his 193rd funeral for a young person killed by gang violence. Where will the next bomb explode, we wonder? And then there's the violence within, from bullying to gossip to name-calling to harsh judgments. My fist can do no more wrong than my tongue can to another human being. All of it, outside of us or inside of us, all of it betrays our humanity. No wonder so many despair of our future together. The world is a violent place, and many of us are deeply disturbed by it all. And it seems to be growing in its frequency and its horror and coming closer and closer in on us. Of course, I can plug my ears, I can cover my eyes, I can leave the room, I can refuse to read the papers, I can protect myself like I try to protect a 5-year-old. I can pretend violence doesn't exist so that I don't give in to fear and end up cowering in a corner somewhere in a fetal position because I'm so afraid for myself or my kids or my spouse or my church or my government or my friends. Because I don't want to be looking over my shoulder every time I go for a walk in Forest Park or even down the street. I remember just a few months back when the verdict was announced after Ferguson, how we locked our doors that night, how gun sales rocketed, and we boarded up our windows. This is no way to live. If Easter cannot speak to the violence of this age, then Easter has nothing to say. Look there at the cross. Do you see the violence there? Do you see that cross as an instrument of torture and execution, and on it hanging an innocent victim of violence? Let me ask you, in the face of such violence, did he hide his face? Did he give up? Did he despair of humanity? Did he return violence for violence? No. Rather, he showed us how. He showed us how. Even though I have lost or could lose everything important to me, how it could even be remotely possible to respond to the violence of the world the way he did. My friends, we worship tonight a victim of violence. He never sought out violence. He was afraid of violence, actually. But his fear of violence never kept him from life. It never kept him from living. It never kept him from acting beyond his fear and doing and saying what is right and loving all the time, and even more. He never gave up on people, even the criminal. As violently as he was treated, he hoped still in people and in the world. He showed a different way to respond to the violence of the world. You see, he found this still point, this resurrection place inside himself. And that was where he stood. That's where he remained standing, no matter what they did to his body or mind. From that still point, he lived his whole public life, and it was from there that he suffered and died. And in the resurrection, he showed us a way now, a way, too, that we can maintain our peace and our confidence even when others are trying their best to destroy it. We can fulfill our mission no matter what sort of violence and blood gets in our way. We now can return nonviolence for violence, kindness for meanness, and our last words could be his last words. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That is what we will baptize these four into tonight. Those who choose to be immersed in the waters of baptism with us tonight will come to know that still point that is theirs now. And they can stand now in the reality of the risen Christ so that they can respond like he did to the violence of the world, to respond from that place of being the beloved of God, even when things are at their worst. You see, reaching to rescue us, to keep us from giving up, reaching for us, to rescue us from despair, from giving up, from nothingness, from bitterness. Let me be clear, that cross is a violent thing. But so is the world a violent thing. And yet, how shocking, how beautiful, how wonderful life can be still, in spite of the cruelty that will happen. And if God can bring life out of a place like that, a violent, horrible, ugly place, then there is nowhere that God cannot reach for life for us. Nothing, my friends, can be more wonderful than that. Nothing. So what are we afraid of? There's a wonderful quote from a man well known to people in recovery. One of our students who's in recovery himself just last week shared it with me. And tonight I share it with you. All things splendid have been achieved by those who dared to believe that something inside of them was superior to circumstance. All things splendid have been achieved by those who dared to believe that something inside themselves was superior to circumstance. That's something I propose to you this Easter night, by whatever name, is the risen Christ reality that dwells inside of us. That's the still point. There are many things a bullet can pierce. Resurrection love is the one thing that a bullet cannot pierce. It's that one thing, that something that enables still Father Greg to bury 193 young people when every single time it breaks his heart. In Greg's words, we will be toppled without some sort of resurrection faith. We will be toppled. This is not something we automatically know, he said. This risen Christ reality tells me violence is not more powerful than love. And Maggie Baranitsky, she's the one who lost her whole family and witnessed such atrocities you can't describe. She went on the next week because her home was empty now. And she brought in 25 children right then. And since then, over 30,000 young people now have found a home with her. 30,000. And the murderers, the criminals, she calls them her brothers. In her words, I am Christian, she says. I know that our human vocation is to love. I will make a new generation of Hutu and Tutsi together. And I believe that God is good, and God would help me. That is what Easter has to say to the violence of this world. And tonight, would that you and I could make those words our own in our day. Would that each of us could say this Easter night, I am Christian. I know that our human vocation is to love. I will make a new generation of blacks and whites, of rich and poor, of straight and gay, of liberal and conservative, educated and uneducated, Christian and Muslim. And I believe that God is good and God would help me.